Hey everyone, welcome to Singularity Computers Client Build 20 Part 1. The name of this build is Event Horizon. This is going to be another extremely high-end water-cooled build, as you've heard me say many times before. It's going into the Caselabs Magnum TH10A, and it's going to have a number of mods, including custom paint, custom cables, some internal case mods, and some custom Singularity Computers components. So this is going to be a theme build, and I'll talk about the theme later in the build log, but the color scheme is going to be blue and black. Let's start with a brief overview of the components. We have the MSI X99A Godlike, the Intel Core i7-5960X, 32GB of Corsair Vengeance LPX, the Samsung SM951 512GB M.2 PCIe SSD, two EVGA GTX 980 Ti's, and a Corsair AX1200i. For the water cooling components, we have all EK Nickel Plexi CSQ clean water blocks, including the EK Supremacy Evo, two water blocks and backplates for the graphics cards, water blocks for the memory, and a water block for the MOSFETs on the motherboard. For the radiator fans, we have Corsair SP120 PWM Quiet Editions. For the case fans, we have Corsair AF120 Quiet Editions. We have two Bits Power D5 acrylic upgrade kit 250s in combination with Bits Power D5 acrylic mod tops and Black Sparkle mod kits. We have Aqua Computer D5 pumps, the Aquarius 6 XT, the Aqua Computer Farbwork Rgb Lighting controller, and to go with this I have a bunch of RGB LED strips. So this lighting is going to go nicely with the lighting on the motherboard, and this is fully controlled by the Aquarius 6. I also have an extra heatsink for the Aquarius 6 XT. So that's most of the components that are going into the build. We'll take a look at the rest of the components during the build log. The Event Horizon is the gateway or entrance to a black hole, and that is the name and the theme for this build. Now you can take a theme literally, and there's certainly a place for that. That is something I have done previously, but the way I prefer to build my systems is with a subtle and understated aesthetic. So instead of taking the theme literally, I prefer to take aspects of the theme and present them in a subtle way. But if you're going to do this, those aspects have to be absolutely perfect. Otherwise the theme just loses its meaning and becomes inaccurate. And obviously the most important aspect of the theme for this build, because there's only really a couple of aspects, is the custom paint. So this custom paint had to be perfect. You know, it had to be the exact effect that I originally envisioned when I designed and thought about this build, which is a galaxy-like effect, you know, kind of sparkles in it that look like stars, distant stars, and the kind of shimmer that you see around a black hole in the movies. And it also needed to be very dark and to incorporate the color scheme blue and black. And so after a lot of experimenting with different products, you know, pearls, metallics, candies, different combinations, I ended up with this effect, which is a black metallic called Black Magic underneath, and then over the top a custom Singularity Computers blue pearl, you know, like a one-off custom pearl that I had mixed up. And it's not a full cover, so you can actually see the black metallic through the blue pearl. And this pearl has a number of different blues in it, so depending on the light and angle, this custom paint job will change from black to light blue to dark blue, even to silver, because there is a little bit of silver in this blue pearl. And you know, it sparkles a lot because of the metallic. And also something else that was very important to get a deep three-dimensional effect for this custom paint job was a thick clear coat and a perfect mirror finish. So you can see that this custom paint job does have a perfect mirror finish, which takes an incredible amount of time and effort. And this is referred to as a show car finish. It's the sort of finish that you see on supercars. And you know, usually most paint jobs on, you know, for example, cars will have orange peel. So you spray it with a gun and then that's it, you leave it. But with a lot of effort, you can actually get a perfect flat mirror finish. And I made a video on how to do this recently. I'll put a link on the screen. It's part of my new modding guide series. First up, let's take a look at the radiators. I have here 4 Black Ice Nemesis L Series Extreme 480mm radiators. And this is a new series from Black Ice, but they have all of the usual Black Ice features, including the M4 threads, protection under the threads. These radiators have a 25 micron 13 FPI split fin array, full copper and brass construction, which is really my favorite thing about Black Ice radiators. And these radiators are a little bit thinner than the usual radiator of this form factor at 53.6 millimeters thick. And you can see that the construction is a bit different to what we've seen from Black Ice previously. You know, slightly different, the recessed threads. And actually I find the recessed threads not to be the greatest idea on these radiators because, you know, you want the biggest gap between the threads and the fins possible to allow for longer bolts and error. But that's really the only small complaint I have about these radiators. Everything else is great. And I'm going to be doing a custom paint job on all of these radiators to fit the theme. Now there's actually still a small internal case mod that I need to do for this build. And normally I'd never do any mods after custom paint. The reason is obvious. But this is only a small mod. It doesn't have much of an effect on custom paint. And this is just the way I've always had to do things, because if I didn't do things in this particular order, this little mod would massively delay my builds. Because I obviously do my paint jobs first, often long before the rest of the components arrive. But I need a lot of the components for measuring and test fitting to be able to do this mod. And you'll see what the mod is coming up in the build log. But until I've done this mod, I can't install any of the components. So what I'm doing now is going through and preparing all of the components for installation, so that once this mod is done, I can install all of the components without any delay. You can see that I've now finished the custom paint on the radiators. And I'm really happy with the way this has turned out. The camera is actually not picking up the effect very well. This is the same black metallic called Black Magic that I used on the case underneath the blue pearl, but I actually mixed with the clear coat a very fine blue flake. It's a 100 micron blue flake, and actually quite a lot of it. And you know, this is going to fit the color scheme and the theme nicely because it creates a nice subtle sparkle. Now that I've completed the custom paint on the radiators, it's time to install the fans, and I'm also going to do all of the cable management for the fans while the radiators and fans are outside of the build. You should do as much of the assembly as you can outside of the build, obviously. Even with a case of this size, you know, it does give you a lot more freedom to build however you want, to do a lot of the assembly inside of the case. But you'd be surprised, around the back of the TH10A there's actually a lot less room, and by the time you install the fans onto the radiators and install the radiators, there's actually not that much space left to do your cable management. So I have all of the black painted fan rings here ready to install, and also the Silverstone dust filters that I'm going to be using for this build. I've used these dust filters previously for Caselabs cases and they work great. They're not removable, but they don't need to be, because all you need to do is give these a quick vacuum once every 3 to 6 months. Now this is a step that you should never miss. It doesn't matter what radiators you are using, what brand, and it doesn't matter if they say that they're pre-flushed. I almost always find gunk in radiators to some extent, and usually Black Ice radiators are fairly clean. I'm actually set up to do this somewhere else normally, but it's not a great place for filming, so I've just set up here on the floor. But this is all I do, and I find that this is all that is necessary. I mean, if this didn't work, you'd certainly pay for it later because you'd see the gunk in the loop, but it certainly does work. I flush the radiators out with distilled water about 5 to 10 times, normally 10 times, and it works very well. You can see how much gunk actually came out of these radiators. This is mostly flux, a bit of paint, but this is pretty normal. I've now installed the black fan rings, and this is certainly a big improvement in my opinion, because for me, fans are something that I don't want to draw attention to. I want them to be subtle, to blend in, and most of the time they're not a feature, they're just a necessity, something that you need but you don't want to have. They're always in full view, but I want them to be as subtle as possible, and the fan ring colors that came included with these fans just don't fit the color scheme for this build. So this is a big improvement. Now, these are not the fan splitters I'm going to be using. I am going to be using Mod My Toys, but I'm going to be using the PWM version because the radiator fans are all PWM, and I'm running them from the Aquero 6. The case fans are not PWM, they're 3-pin, and I'm going to run those directly from the power supply because the case fans are not very detrimental. It doesn't really matter that much what they're running at, or if I even install case fans, they're not going to make a whole lot of difference. I'm mainly just installing them for positive pressure, and I'll talk more about this later in the build. The radiator fans though, I'm going to be setting up fan curves, very important, and I'll show you how all of that works later in the build log also. But you can see what I mean about setting all of this up outside of the case. There's a massive amount of work that has gone into this cable management and setting all of this up with the splitters. It actually took me 5 hours to do all of this. Cut the cables to length, repin them, new connector, sleeve them, and connect them all up properly, ready to go. So once I install these, there's only one more cable that needs to run from each radiator, each set of 4 fans, to the Aquero 6. So a lot of the work is now done. Now this other splitter I have over here is for the case fans because I'm running them directly from the power supply. I'm now going to prepare the pump and reservoir configurations for installation. And once I do this, I'm going to move on to the internal case mods and also another addition. I'm going to be installing a custom reservoir mounting plate. And these are configs you see me using a lot in my builds. I absolutely love the Bits Power upgrade kits, the Bits Power pump tops and pump mods. These are components that have been around for a long time now, and they just look amazing. They're a lot more compact than some of the other versions, lightweight, elegant, and you can see that I couldn't install the bases on the Black Sparkle mod kits because of the connections that are on the back of these Aquacomputer D5 pumps, and I am going to be using some of that connectivity, but that's not really a problem because they're not going to be in view anyway. It's great to have the back parts of those mod kits because sometimes you can make that a feature depending on whether it's in view, but in this case it's not. Now this is the stock reservoir mounting plate that comes with the TH10A. This is something that was added to the TH10A compared to the original TH10, and this is in a lot of Caselabs cases now. It's certainly a great idea. Caselabs is definitely heading in the right direction here, as they have with everything else for high-end water-cooled systems. But for me, these are just not going to be big enough. Because of the way I'm mounting my pump and res configs, the length of them, the large reservoir tubes, I need a bigger reservoir mounting plate. And I like to kill 2 birds with 1 stone with my res mounting plates and use them to clean up the aesthetics a bit, to cover up some of the cable routing holes that I'm not going to be using, and just to clean things up a bit. A lot of you are probably not going to recognize this component. For so many years now, you've heard me talking about everybody else's parts. Well, it feels weird to be talking about one of my own. This is one of the first components that I've officially released and started to mass produce. This is the ethereal dual version. I also have a single version, and it's compatible with most tube reservoirs, 60mm, Bits Power, EK, Alpha Cool, and so on. It's a full billet mount, so it's solid aluminium, and it's been an incredible challenge to get products on the market. The ideas are not the problem. I have endless ideas and designs that I've developed and come up with over the years, and I've also had a lot of them drawn up. I have somebody I work with to draw up my products and to design them, and he has similar water cooling and computer knowledge to what I do. We make a great team. Getting the products manufactured is the problem, and I actually became so frustrated with the manufacturers that I decided to start building my products by hand myself. And after trying with the workshop to set up to build products myself and what happened there, this is one of the ones I've built by hand, and you'd never know. I mean, just the grooves around the inside for so many manufacturers was such a big problem, and the prices they gave me were just incredible. Well, that is done by hand with a Dremel, and you'd never know that these products are built almost completely by hand because they look like they're CNC milled, and that's because of the time and effort that I put into them. And they're also anodized by me. That's something else that I do. But at last, the first of my products have started to be manufactured. I have managed to set up connections around the world, so it's very exciting. I mean, put it this way, I'm not going to be using the terrible plastic reservoir mounts anymore, which is all that was actually previously available. And you know, this is only the beginning. I have a lot of exciting products that I'm currently working on. It's time for a look at the MSI X99A Godlike Gaming Motherboard. Normally I use Asus ROG boards, mostly due to client requests, but I also like to use them myself, and that's because I've used ROG boards since they were released, and I've never had one fail or had any kind of a problem. I also love the features, and you know, also ROG boards were really the first motherboard that was released that was truly dedicated to overclocking. Just had a massive amount of overclocking features, were really cool looking boards, and everything else that came after that kind of just had to follow. Not that they were copying, but ROG did so much, had so many features, were such great looking boards that there wasn't a whole lot of other things that could be done. And you know, that's what I find with a lot of these motherboards. But every now and then something is released that truly stands out on its own. It has some unique features, it looks unique, and this is an amazing looking board. It has some incredible features. One of them that I'm going to mention is Rgb Lighting. I mean, not very important, but definitely a cool feature and something that we've never seen before. And there's actually RGB LED strips or PCBs all over this board. And you're going to see that as I strip this board down, because something that a lot of you will have already realized, no doubt, and I have no doubt I'm going to get this in the comments a lot, is that this motherboard is black and red, and I'm building a black and blue system. Well, I'm going to be modifying this motherboard, and I'm not just going to be taping it up and spraying it. No, I'm going to be modifying it properly, and it's going to be a challenging mod to turn this motherboard from a black and red motherboard into a black motherboard. And you're going to see how I'm going to do that in the next part of the build log. And at this point, even as I'm making this video, I actually still don't entirely know, because it is quite a challenging mod. I mean, what we have here is all aluminium. We have the alloy heat sinks, aluminium panel, and just looking at the quality of this board, I mean, none of the covers are plastic. They're all aluminium, they're anodized. We have pressed naming here, brushed aluminium, very cool looking, amazing motherboard, and I'm looking forward to doing some overclocking. I'm now test fitting the motherboard, and this is something that I always do early in my builds. I test fit the motherboard, graphics cards, and power supply so that I can get the measurements for the cables for the core components. This is something that I've outsourced for a while now. I have somebody who does this for me. Anything that I can trust somebody with to outsource, that I can delegate, I will. Because I'm trying to build as many systems as I can to bring you guys as many videos as I can. So that is one thing that I can trust somebody with, that I can outsource. So you can see how well the ethereal jewel works, and it's just great to have this component. For so long now I've been using plastic mounts that don't work properly, spacers. I mean, just take a look at my previous builds. This is so much more of an elegant solution. And you can now see the internal case mods that I was talking about. So I'm test fitting those mods. I've made up a custom reservoir mounting panel, and it all test fits properly. So I'm now going to paint this panel, but that is something that you'll see in the next part of the build log. That sums up this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, and favorite if you want to see more.